All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Greg Green, current chair of the Chamber's Legislative Committee. It is my pleasure to welcome everyone to this preview of the upcoming legislative session. Before we get started, I'd like to ask everyone to stand and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance and also a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we are seated, please join me in a moment of silence for two political, civic leaders and past chairmen of the board of the Manatee Chamber who passed away this past year. Businessman C. Donald Miller, Jr., 1980 chairman, and statesman Senator Ed H. Price, Jr., 1967 chairman. Thank you. Please be seated. Before we get started, there is a page full. There's several elected officials in attendance I'd like to introduce to the audience. So please stand and be recognized, and I ask everyone to hold their applause until the end. There is quite a list here. At the back, starting toward the back of the room, Manatee County Judge Gilbert Smith. From the Manatee County Commission, Chairman Larry Bussell, then Commissioners Vanessa Baugh, Betsy Benack, John Chappie, Robin DeSabatino, Michael Gallen, Carol Whitmore. Here we go. Carol. Okay, from the School Board of Manatee County, Karen Carpenter and Julie Aranabar. Dave Brenner, Vice Mayor, Town of Longboat Key. Thank you. Tennille Moore from Representative Darrell Roussan's office. Not here, didn't make it, okay. Jessica Eilerman from CFO Atwater's office. Back, okay. Gary Tibbetts from U.S. Congressman Vern Buchanan's office. And Mayor Wayne Poston from the city of Bradenton. All right. I hope I haven't omitted anyone, but again, welcome everyone and appointed officials as well. I'd also like to recognize the Chamber's Legislative Committee, the Chamber Commandos. Would all of you please stand? All right, cover the room. Good. All right. Our sponsor for today's event is Bright House Networks. We appreciate their ongoing support. Thank you. And then METV is also once again taping for our broadcast. Okay, you'll find the Chamber's legislative priorities at your seat. It's the second page, the one that doesn't, well, they both say agendas, don't they? Our committee and commandos will be heading to Tallahassee again this March and will be working on the following priorities. Economic development and business climate issues, including tax incentives and sports performance being designated as a target industry. Those are at the top of our list. E-commerce, internet sales tax collections, continuing the many years long effort in workforce funding equity. We're so close to having that finished and Over the past couple of years, we've made tremendous progress, but we need this final year to put the final changes in place, as well as other education and anti-business regulatory provisions that you'll see on the list. Also on the list is our list of federal priorities, and the commandos will once again also be planning a trip to D.C. this year. Legislators, job creation has to be a substantive centerpiece. Echoing what we said the past 2 years, every time you cast your vote on a bill, please ask yourself and your colleagues, does it strengthen free enterprise? Does it create jobs? Or does it undermine our free enterprise system? Now I'd like to introduce our legislative delegation. Legislators, please keep your thoughts concise to less than 8 minutes. And everyone in the audience, please save your questions until all of the legislators have a chance to speak. You'll see the guidelines to the Q&A at the bottom of today's agenda. We're going to change the order up a little bit just to keep things interesting, and we'll start off with Senator Bill Galvano.
Thank you. Good morning. Really appreciate being here, and I appreciate the Chamber doing this. This is an important event that occurs on an annual basis and gives us an opportunity to see each other, frankly, before we head off to Tallahassee and get busy doing the work of the people of Florida. Before I go any further, I want to introduce Vicki Brill, who is my LA, new to my staff, and she'll be working constituent issues throughout the district, so hopefully you all will get to know her. Let me tell you, you have a strong delegation. You really, really do. These gentlemen to my right are now both experienced and all in leadership roles in the Florida House, and I really look forward to working with each and every one of them. The district that I represent, or the district that you're in right now from the Senate side, is now District 26. When you met last time, it was District 21, and it is quite different than when it was District 21. District 26 includes Manatee County, Southern Hillsborough County, all of Hardee County, all of DeSoto County, Southern Highlands County, Northern Charlotte, and all of Glades County. So it's quite big from a geographic standpoint. If we were to start in Sun City and start driving towards Lake Okeechobee, by the time you reach the water, you would still be in the district. And so it's an adventure, if you will, but I find that a lot of the issues are the same, and the goals of the people throughout the region are the same. The Senate is a little different than when you met last time, too. We maintain a Republican majority in the Senate, but we don't maintain a supermajority. We have a new Senate President, Don Gates. He comes from the Panhandle, very much a believer in what the Chamber espouses, being job creation and the promotion of opportunity for the economy to grow throughout the state. We have been appointed to committees and assigned chairmanships. I have been appointed chairman of Education Appropriations, and that's K through 12 and the university system. And this is a new area for me. I mean, I served on appropriations committees in the House of Representatives and worked a variety of issues and served on education. But we have done now in the Senate something that maybe has been done in the past, but not in the recent past, and put it all together, put the universities, pre-K and K through 12 together. And so it represents $27 billion, or 51% of our general revenue budget. So as you can imagine, I have a lot of new friends. And hopefully by the time session's over, I don't have a lot of new enemies. But it's busy, and we've started work on it. And if I can give you the theme of my chairmanship, it's going to be this. We are going to link education to job and opportunity creation, to really take our education system from a funding standpoint and make it match what it needs to for the modern world today. And whether that's advancements in technology, partnerships with business, looking at critical areas of job opportunity and matching it to our education system. That's what we'll be doing, and that's what we hope to accomplish. The budget overall is better, so look to having a better budget than we've had in the recent past. We got through two close calls, if you will, one being the fiscal cliff that would have had billions of dollars of impact on the state budget, and the other was a recent court ruling where the court sustained the legislature's pension pay-in by a 4-3 vote. That, if that had gone the other way, it would have been another big hit to our budget. Personal priorities with this as the budget improves. I want to work on the developmentally disabled wait list. We need to start bringing people off of that wait list, people who need services, and make sure that they are getting the services they need. You know, I've always tried to legislate from the Lincoln principle, if you will, that the role of governments to do for those who can't do for themselves or well for themselves, and that's going to continue to be a focus. I see Mary Ruiz is here. Mental health, big issue this year. I have a bill in drafting, and I'll be working with you to make sure we are addressing that as well. Obviously, I'm going to continue to work with each and every one of you as issues come up, work with our local governments. I'm very proud of the local elected officials that we have in our community and the leadership they provide, and so I will be looking to them for advice and also looking to them to help us become a leader in the region, and I will continue to focus on regional issues. I'm reviewing several bills presently. I'm not going to file a large number of bills. That's going to be something that's a little different from my perspective as a senator. And so once I've made a decision, we'll put them in, and that will happen in the very near future. But it's going to be a busy session, but one that I look forward to, not just working with you gentlemen, but working with all of you here in this room. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Galvano. Next, from District 70, Representative Darrell Rousson.
Thank you very much, and good morning. Good morning. I want you to know that I debated on whether I come here this morning. Senator Latvala called a 9 o'clock Pinellas County delegation meeting in Clearwater, and so I have to go to that, but the debate didn't last long. Julie McClure, former representative, welcome. I'm glad to see you here this morning. I want you to know that we are not the last man standing still in Tallahassee. We've improved the Democratic caucus from 39 to 44. Some of you may have read or heard that I am running for minority leader in the House. I have won the election. I have collected 29 of 44 pledge cards. All I needed was 23, but they keep moving the number up on me. I'm trying to bring the bacon home. It's been a long time since we've had a minority leader from the Tampa Bay area. Senator Les Miller was the last one when he was in the House some 10 years ago, and it's been since 1996 since we've had a Democratic speaker, Peter Rudy Wallace from St. Petersburg. And so I'm doing everything I can to represent Manatee, Sarasota, Pinellas, and Hillsborough counties as a leader in the House. And I, too, am very excited to work with Senator Galvano. The delegation you see up here is a strong delegation. There's some very important bills coming up this year. And as I mentioned to Ms. Dowling this morning, I'm excited about the new Democratic caucus. We have 24 freshman members of the 44 in the House. And some of them come with some very strong business background and experience. And I believe that that will be a shift in terms of the Democratic caucus for business affairs and chambers. And I think that the Florida Chamber doesn't need to write us off anymore. We have some very strong independent businessmen on the Democratic side that have been elected to the House, and I'm looking forward to working with them. As the Senator said, Mr. Boyd, Representative Boyd, is chair of the Elections Committee, and I'm serving on that committee. That's going to be a big issue this year, elections reform and ethics reform. I filed a bill October 17th in drafting to deal with the reforming of the deform that happened with House Bill 1355. We said then it was a bad bill. It was going to set bad precedent and bad policy, and it did. We predicted it. My bill was one of the first bills to come out, and I'm glad now that the governor's mansion and some others see fit to follow some of what was written in the bill before they got Jesus. Education funding is huge. And you know, in 2011, we cut $1.3 billion from education. We found God in 2012, and we gave $1 billion back. But we're still $300 million short. And teacher pay, as well as state workers, some of whom have gone without raises for 6 years, is hugely significant. And we're going to fight hard for those principles up in Tallahassee. Budget, we're sitting pretty good right now. Thank God for the court ruling. Didn't hit us hard. But budget's going to be very important, and how we divvy it up and where it's spent. We must do it wisely, considering the health and welfare of our people. School safety and funding for school safety is going to be huge. And mental health. We have got to readdress some of these issues of mental health funding. Yesterday at 6 o'clock, I was in Gainesville speaking to a number of the residents at the inpatient treatment center in Gainesville at the Florida Recovery Center. And I'm telling you, mental health and substance abuse treatment, we've got to quit treating it like a stepchild. One of the bills that I filed this year, you know, I've had a running battle with head shops for a long time. Speaker Weatherford told me that if these shops were still laughing at us 2 years later when we sought to regulate them, we'd just ban them, close them down. And I'm pleased to say that the Florida Sheriff's Association, the Florida Prosecuting Attorneys Association, Attorney General Pam Bondi, all stand behind this bill to finally close shops, some of which are set up across the street from high schools, which is what got this battle started in St. Petersburg. We can get rid of this hypocrisy. My district, my new District 70, has been expanded. I still represent all of South Pinellas County in St. Petersburg. They took the dome out like a little finger. I don't know why they X'd the dome out, but I still have City Hall, the police department, St. Pete to the Skyway Bridge. I mean, it's really something. I have the block north of it, the block south of it, and the block west of it, but I don't have anything east of it.
Nobody lives in the dome.
Nobody lives in the dome. I still don't know why they did that. But I come across the Skyway Bridge, and I represent still the northern end of Manatee County, Bradenton, and Palmetto. Finger still into Sarasota County, down the Fruitville Road, east and west of 301. And as if I didn't have enough of Hillsborough County, they expanded me northward to the lower third of Riverview, including Ruskin. So I have a wonderful district, and I enjoy it very much. I'm sorry that I have to leave you this morning. I'm leaving you in great and capable hands. But pray for us. Know that our numbers on the Democratic side are improving. And I think that the closer we get as parties in the House, the better the legislation that will come out of the House. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Roussan. Next, Representative Jim Boyd, District 71.
Thank you, Greg. I kind of liked the lineup earlier because I told Representative Roussan on the floor one day after a pretty lively debate between the two of us, if I was ever on trial for my life, I'd like for him to be able to do my closing argument. So I always hate to go after him because he's a good and gifted speaker. And we do share a lot in common, all of us, and it is a great delegation, and it's awesome to be part of it. And we're glad to have our friend Bill back in the Senate. Mike Bennett, of course, did a wonderful job for this community, but Bill's long-standing work here on our behalf is just easy transition for him in the Senate, and it's going to be great to work with him on all the issues that are important to us as a community. Thank you again for allowing us to be here today. We've got a lot to talk about, so I'll try to be brief. Some of the comments that Senator Galvano and Representative Roussan have hit, I was going to talk on, so obviously they checked my notes beforehand, but our district changed a little bit as well. I'm District 71 now, which is the western part of Manatee County and the northwest part of Sarasota County. So it's, I think, really good for us to have that part of Sarasota in our district now. There's a lot of synergy from tourism, economic development, just lifestyles, the arts, lots of things that we can do together to strengthen our community and our district. So I'm excited to have that as part of our legislative district. The committees that I'm on this year have changed as the others have from last year. I'm on civil justice, which is new to me. It deals with lots of business issues and lots of the legal issues around business, which is very exciting for me. I'm glad to be able to be part of that. I'm on ag and natural resources again, which I'm very happy about, as ag is such a huge part of our economy and our community as well as our state. So I'm thrilled to be on that. And then, as was mentioned, the speaker asked me to chair one of the speaker's priorities, which is elections, ethics, and campaign finance reform. No small task. Although we share a lot in common and we agree on a lot of issues, I think the elections reform bill that we passed a couple years ago was a good start. Obviously, we made some mistakes and we're trying to fix those now. So I don't believe there's going to be a long road to getting toward some good positive reform in the elections, campaign finance, and ethics arena. Very important issues that we're tackling and very important issues that we're dealing with. But what my main goal in the process is to work collaboratively with both sides, our party, the Republican Party, and Darrell's side with the Democrats, to do what's right for Florida. We've had great conversations so far. Representative Roussan and I have met, a couple of his colleagues and I have met on issues that are important to them, and also, which is very nice, I think, a lot of those issues are the same issues that we on our side think are important as well. So it'll be exciting to work through that process. We hope to get that started pretty early in the year. I think there's an aggressive schedule in the Senate on that as well. So hopefully the first part of session we'll have something on the floor that we can talk about and debate and try to do what's right for Florida. So I think you'll see a lot around that very early, and I'm excited, very excited, and honored to be part of that. Some of the things that Senator Galvano mentioned, the budget, finally the first 2 years that Greg and I were up there, Representative Roussan had been there before, but we faced a $6 billion shortfall, as you know, so that wasn't a lot of fun trying to figure out how to plug those holes. This year, because of some things that have already been discussed, it's going to be a little easier, so we're not out of the woods, but we're still going to be hopefully in the positive as an economy, and we do feel good things are starting to happen and the economy is starting to kind of crawl its way back. But jobs and people getting back to work is primary on everybody's mind, both parties, most every committee. Everybody's talking still about jobs and getting unemployment down. So I think that'll still be a huge focus, and I'm excited to be part of that. Healthcare is going to be another big topic of debate this year. With affordable health care, we've got to decide how to deal with that as a state. I'm not on a healthcare committee. I believe Representative Stubbe is. He can probably speak to it a little better than I, but they're having meetings as we speak on how to deal with everything from the exchanges to implementation of perhaps Medicaid dollars, more or less, whatever. So those will be important issues as we move into the session. I think under Speaker Weatherford's leadership, and kind of like the Senate, we don't have a supermajority on the Republican side now, but we still do have the majority, and his leadership is going to be pro-business, pro-education, and just continuing the momentum I think that we've been building over the past couple of years. Education is a big issue. It couldn't be better. I don't think that, although it's new to him, that Senator Galvano chairs the appropriation side of that. That's going to be huge for education. It's going to be huge for our community as well. We've talked a little bit beforehand about MTI. Over the past couple of years, we were able to bring some additional funding to MTI through moving toward equity throughout the system. I think that's going to continue. I know Bill worked on that back in the House days, so it's nothing new to him, and we've worked on it since we've been there, so I think that's going to be important for us to continue. So overall, it should be a very good session. It should be a very positive session. I think there's a lot of good, but I think if you kind of summed it up, it's going to be elections, education, and healthcare probably. Although all of us have other priorities, I think those are going to be probably three of the big topics that'll be worked on. One last thing I'd like to mention, I've got a couple bills that I'm working on outside of elections, and one I think is very good for economic development, and it came to me through our friends at Tropicana, but it deals with manufacturing across the state, and it's really a pretty common sense idea, which is usually, I guess, why things don't move real fast in government, but this is good for our economy, it's good for manufacturing. Essentially, it says if you've got a, let's say Tropicana, I don't know what their acreage is, but let's say they have 20 acres of square acres of property. If you have all that approved, whatever you're going to do on that property, and it's gone all the way up from local, county, up through state government approvals, and you've got your plan and everything's approved, and then let's say you decide to put a plastic plant instead of a box plant on part of that property, as long as it doesn't, change life safety or violate any codes that are important for the community, you're able to move things around on your property without having to go back through the long and costly process of all of the governmental approval. So hopefully that'll get some traction. I believe, are you carrying that in the Senate? And that was a really, so that's a very loose description of what the bill is, but hopefully that'll get some traction and be able to help manufacturers so we can get manufacturing back to Florida as we desperately need for jobs. So looking forward to your questions in a little bit, but thank you again for having us. It's always a pleasure to be around our friends in the business community. Thank you. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Jim. Next, Representative Greg Stubbe, District 73.
Thank you, and thank you, Greg, for having us today. It's always a pleasure to come to the Chamber's events. I guess I'm batting cleanup today. Not much hasn't been talked about of the big issues that we're going to deal with this year. As has been mentioned, the elections, the budget is also a big issue. We have I sit on one of the committees I sit on is the Full Appropriations Committee. Last 2 years, I sat on the Healthcare Subcommittee, Appropriations Committee, where we appropriated healthcare. Now I sit on the Full Appropriations Committee, so I'll be on the committee that appropriates the entire state budget this year in the House, which is going to be a challenge. But it's going to be not as much of a challenge as it has been in the past 2 years, well, 4 years for us, because of the budget. We're looking at probably a $700 million positive this year, which is much better than what we've dealt with previously. So trying to figure out how we're going to appropriate those dollars is going to be excellent. The other committees that I serve on, I'm vice chair of business and professional regulations. So any industry in the state of Florida that's regulated, from CPAs to boxing, believe it or not, we actually regulate boxing in the state of Florida. We just had a presentation from the boxing commissioner last committee meeting. We'll come through that committee. So it's an enjoyable committee to be the vice chair of just about anything that's regulated will come through there, and any bills that have a regulatory flair to them will come through that committee. I also am vice chair of health innovation. Our first committee had a presentation from the ACA secretary on Medicaid. So I think Medicaid are going to be some of the things that we deal with in that committee. The main Medicaid reform issues pursuant to the Affordable Health Care Act will be dealt with in the Affordable Health Care Committee that we have in the House. We have a specific committee that is going to look at the Affordable Health Care Act and see what we're going to do from the state perspective on that. One of the things that we have to decide is, are we going to expand Medicaid in the state of Florida pursuant to the act, or are we not, and if so, how far? So that's one of the things that committee is going to deal with, but specifically in the committee that I'm vice chair of, we look at issues both in Medicaid and in ACA as well. So anything from a policy perspective we'll also be dealing with in the Health Innovation Committee. I also sit on the full Regulatory Affairs Committee. So anything in the Regulatory Affairs Committee, like Business and Professional Regulation, would then go up through the full Regulatory Affairs Committee. You have a very strong delegation in Manatee and Sarasota County. You have Senator Galvano chairing Education Appropriations in the Senate. In that committee, the full Regulatory Affairs Committee, Doug Holder is the chairman, and he's in Sarasota County. And then you have Jim Boyd chairing Elections and Ethics in the House. So you have a very strong Manatee and Sarasota County delegation that are in very key leadership positions in both the House and the Senate. I'm also on the Rulemaking Oversight and Repeal Subcommittee, which will deal with any type of repealer language or repeals that we want to do into the statutes. We did a lot of repealers the last 2 years under Speaker Cannon because he actually allowed us, most of you may not know this, in the House, we only can file 6 bills. In the Senate, they can file as many as they want. In the House, we're limited to 6. In the last 2 years, though, we changed the rules. Speaker Cannon changed the rules to allow us to file a complete repealer bill. So if it was just taking language out of statute, it didn't count towards one of our 6 bills. So in the last 2 years, we repealed a litany of statutes that we didn't really use anymore, or statutes that were inhibiting business growth and business development and economic development. But this year, a repealer is still counted towards our 6. So we had to be very cautious in the 6 bills that we're filing. I have 2 bills filed right now. My first bill that I filed is a public-private partnership bill. The local counties, municipalities, the hospitals, the schools should all be, and universities should all be very, very interested in this bill. It will allow a public-private partnership to fund, let's say, infrastructure needs. So if USF needs to build a dorm, they can, through this statute, once this statute gets enacted, can use a public-private partnership to fund that infrastructure need. So they can have a private investor put up a third, they can have the university put up a third, and the state put up a third. So it'll really help from an infrastructure perspective, especially in our schools this year, because as many of you may know, our PICO dollars in the state, which is your capital improvement dollars for education, it's basically gone. We don't have money right now because of our debt ratio to issue PICO funds right now. So to give universities and municipalities and counties the ability, and Port Manatee is another great example of someone that can utilize a public-private partnership to fund infrastructure needs. So I filed that bill in the House. It's the first bill I filed in the House, and it's online now. You can go and read the bill if you want. The second bill that's actually filed, I filed the FWC bill, the Fish and Wildlife Commission bill this year. The reason I filed it is it has 3 veteran components to it. As many of you know, I'm a veteran of both the Iraq War and then served in the Army for 5 years. It will lower the licensing for our veterans and our disabled veterans that want to hunt or fish or do saltwater fishing. There's 5 components to the bill, but 3 of the components have a veteran aspect, and those 3 components are lowering the fees or completely eliminating them for disabled veterans or combat veterans that have served our country if they want to enjoy hunting or fishing or saltwater fishing in our great state. 3 other bills that I'm looking at doing. I am going to do a safety in schools bill. We've heard a lot of things in the news about safety in schools because of the incidents that have happened in Connecticut. I am going to be addressing and have a bill in drafting. It hasn't popped out yet, so I haven't gotten to file it. There's going to be many components to that. One of the main component is having school resource officers or some type of school enforcement officer at our schools. It's also going to provide funding for counseling at our schools. It's also going to provide funding for those school resource officers and safety. They're technically called school safety officers in our schools. And it's going to be probably, there'll probably be some people in here that are going to have issues with parts of it because it is going to repeal parts of the concealed weapons permit statute. Because right now, I have a concealed carry permit. I was in the military and I went through the process to get a concealed weapon in the state of Florida. Right now, if you have a concealed permit, you can't go on school grounds, you can't go on university grounds. So I'm going to repeal parts of that because I feel that law-abiding citizens who go through the training and go through the process to possess a concealed firearm should be able to protect themselves and their family and their children. So the specific language is not out yet, but it will be something that will probably be hotly discussed. I look forward to discussing all of the issues as it relates to schools and guns and school safety specifically by putting more uniformed officers and safety officers in our schools to prevent something that happened in Connecticut from happening here in Manatee and Sarasota County. I also am doing an E911 bill again. Last year I did some implementing language that would allow E911 to do things like if you have a cell phone, you can text help to 911. If you have a cell phone, you can take a picture or a video of a crash scene and then send it to Manatee County so they can actually, if a firefighter's responding to a fire, he can actually see real-time footage from your cell phone of the fire that he's responding to. So I did the implementing language so they can do that now. But the different 911s don't have the financial capability to be able to utilize that. So what we've done is, you may not be aware, but in the state of Florida, everybody probably doesn't really look at all of their cell phone bill. But on your cell phone bill, your wireless cell phone bill, there's a little E911 communications tax. It's 50 cents. Well, if you go and buy a disposable phone at Walmart, you don't pay that tax. If you buy a disposable phone at Metro PCS, which like 85% of their business, Metro PCS's business, is the pay before you use phones or the phones you get at like Walmart or Target. They don't pay the communication services tax that would then fund those 911 services. So if you buy a disposable phone and you call 911, you're still using the services, but you're not paying for it. So what this would do is complete that across the board and make sure anybody that buys a cell phone in the state of Florida is paying that communication service tax for 911. That way we can build up these capabilities and do the great things that we have the technology to do, but the different counties don't have the funding to be able to have the capabilities to do the video and the texting and that sort of thing from our cell phones from an emergency perspective. So with that, I'm looking forward to your questions, and thank you very much for having us here today. Thanks.
Okay, we're ready to begin question and answers. Again, the guidelines are on your table. If you would please move to the microphone over here, and we're set to begin. Hello.
Carol Whitmore, Manatee County Commission. The Florida Association of Counties is working with the governor's office right now, and it's regarding the Florida Association's stand is they want to give the states back the Medicaid issue. Just give us a formula that we have to pay every year, all the counties, and we do that rather than going through all this bureaucracy. It'll save the state money and it'll save the counties money. The state pays a lot of money to try to figure out the bills on what the counties owe, and the counties do too. So the Florida League of Counties mission is to hopefully give you back the program. You tell us what we owe. We're working with the governor's office to come up with a fair solution, and then we'll just pay that, and then you deal with Medicaid. So I just wanted to warn the legislators because we do need your support on that. And I guess Representative Stubbe, that would be your area. Thank you.
Okay. No question? Okay.
Do you want me to comment?
Go ahead and comment on it.
I'll comment on the comment. That's been an issue that was brought to us, came up last year, and has been brought to us in both the Manatee and Sarasota County legislative delegation meetings. And I asked the commissioners about is there a certain plan or is there language that we have that we can put in and solve this problem and make sure it's equitable. And I have been working personally with the Association of Counties on that, have had several meetings with them, and have asked them several times to provide language to me, and I still haven't received that language. They've told me that they've been working with the governor's office to try to clear that language, but as I explained to them when I met with them last week or the week before, our bill filing draft deadline was last Friday. So if we don't have draft language in by the deadline was last Friday, then, yeah, Jim didn't know.
Just kidding.
Then the language won't be in drafting unless somebody else submitted it. So then, as I explained to them, at that point, the only option is you could do a committee bill, but that committee chairman or the leadership in either the House or the Senate would have to agree to run that language. But I had multiple meetings with them and requested language starting from when we had our delegation meeting in, what was that, November timeframe, and asking them for language to help address that issue. And I still haven't been given any of that language. So I hope that they can they have told me that they've been working with the governor's office on it. If that's the case and we can move forward with some language, hopefully we can put something in like a committee bill to try to address it.
Okay, next.
Good morning. My name is John Zimnicki. I'm a local architect, but more importantly, I'm chairman of the Board of Governors and chairman of the MTI Foundation, your 9-time national champ Skills USA school. As you well know, we have funding problems, and workforce development, workforce funding has been on the wrong side of MTI for the last 15 years. I want to thank our representatives for the last 2 years because we have worked on the formula for equity funding, and we're in the 3rd year, which is crucial because we need to make this formula stick. So for Senator Galvano now, who's been a champion for us for a lot of years, we'd like to see this formula changed permanently so MTI can get the funding that we have currently right now. And secondly, those of you who have been driving by our new school on State Route 70, we are in our new building. We have a grand opening on February 14th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you are all invited. So we're very proud of our new building, and I'd like you to come see what MTI has been doing for your community. Thank you very much.
So your question would be something along the lines of, will workforce equity funding be extended permanently?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Gentlemen? No, these are softballs, everyone. I mean, of course, we've been working on it for I mean, I started back in '08, and then you all made tremendous progress. We're going to continue to work on it. It is still politics, and there are many components to it, so I'm not going to make any pronouncement, but know that your delegation is going to continue to work on it. And we love what you're doing at MTI.
Real briefly, John, on the House side, we are continuing the fight. We've already talked to the leadership on the House side about it. They're still favorable on it. We couldn't have a better guy in the Senate championing the effort. So I feel positive that we'll continue that movement toward equity, and like we'd all like to do is get it fixed once and for all. So it just is in place. So.
Okay, Nick.
Thanks, Greg. My name, excuse me. My name is Nick Seck. I am on the legislative committee here at the Manatee Chamber of Commerce, and I also work with Boyd Insurance and Investment Services. First one for Representative Boyd. Jim, we're real busy. Can you work with us this week? Can you come back to work this week? Okay. Touche in public. Good job. Thanks. The upcoming implementation of fees and taxes that are part of the upcoming or part of Obamacare or the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act is happening now. We're starting to have discussions with the insurance companies as to what the increasing premiums are going to wind up being for insurance costs on a lot of our clients and a lot of the members of the Chamber of Commerce. Can you guys give us bring us up to date on what's going on and how we're going to actually deal with the increasing cost of the insurance portion of this act?
Are you directing that to
I'm scared. Who wants to
anyone
take it?
anyone who wants to field it?
I mean,
Greg, you're on that committee.
yeah.
I'll go and then I'll let Senator Galvano add. It's a tough issue, and I don't think anybody has the answers to your questions yet. I don't think anybody in leadership has figured out what we're going to do. We had a deadline to create an exchange. As you know, being in the insurance industry, you had to create a healthcare exchange pursuant to the Affordable Health Care Act. That deadline that was given to us by the federal government was like November or December. It was like December 10th. Well, in Florida, the legislature doesn't meet until March. So how in the heck could Florida create its own exchange by December 10th unless we had a special session to specifically address that, called all of us up to specifically address that issue? And I don't think really anybody knows exactly how or what we're going to do. So the feds created our exchange, or going to create our exchange for us. And I think there may be some bigger timelines on that, because if you listen to the Federal Health and Human Services Secretary, there's so many states, because the timeline was so short after the elections, that just said, okay, you guys figure it out. And now they're like, oh my God, we got to figure out 35 states' healthcare exchanges, and they don't have the staff to do it. So that's one of the issues, is the healthcare exchanges. Are you going to do a federal exchange, which now we technically are because we missed the deadline? Are you going to do a state exchange? I've also heard some of the leadership in both our House and the Senate said we're going to try to do some type of hybrid. Well, I would think that we're probably going to have to get federal involvement in that if we are going to do a hybrid type exchange. Taking that a step further, are we going to? The next question is that Affordable Health Care Committee. I think they have you have one in the Senate too, right? Yeah. We have an Affordable Health Care Act Senate committee and House committee. They're specifically going to look at the issues that you have questions about, and they're going to do that over this legislative session. One of the things that we have to decide is, are we going to expand Medicaid? Everything that, pursuant to the act, everything that I have seen, and having sat on health care appropriations for the last 2 years in the House, I don't think we can expand Medicaid, because if we did, it would be like a $10 billion price tag. And the only way we can fund that, because we only have a $700 million surplus this year, is if we raise taxes significantly to be able to fund those expansions in Medicaid. So I think if there are going to, and this is just Greg Stubbe talking, I think if there are going to be any expansions, most of the leadership that I have heard, I haven't gotten a sense that there's going to be an expansion in Medicaid, and I could be wrong on that. But my gist is that there's not going to be, because of the fiscal aspect that comes with that. But if there is going to be, it's going to have to be gradual in order for us as a state to be able to fund those additional costs in Medicaid.
But the increasing costs that are going to be coming on to small businesses as part of that.
100%. And again, to me, that's the Federal Health Care Act putting those restrictions on the state of Florida, and not the other way around.
But we're still going to have to deal with it. We're talking
Right.
about job creation when we're increasing insurance costs to small businesses 20 to 50% upcoming based on just the federal regulations. Do we have any plan? We don't know yet. This is what you're saying, Greg.
I think the committee's going to address that.
Okay.
And if the
Yeah,
senator,
just a couple comments. And Representative Stubbe's right on. And in the Senate, we have a committee dedicated to the Affordable Care Act. And just to add on what he said about the exchanges, from my perspective, we ultimately have to deal with it. I'd prefer to see the state of Florida control its own destiny than turn anything over to the federal government at this point. The real shame of the Affordable Care Act is this. Florida has maintained its credit rating, its stability, its financial security by making tough decisions and doing what it's had to do as a state to make sure that we are meeting our fiscal demands. And back in 06, I believe it was, we realized that Medicaid was eating up the budget like a Pac-Man, really. It was going to put us under in a matter of a decade. And so Florida took control. We established some pilots under the leadership of Governor Bush to start shifting the way that we addressed Medicaid. And then finally, under the leadership of these gentlemen to my right and the rest of the legislature over the last 2 years, took the final steps to have a statewide expansion and worked with the federal government, got the waivers, the authorizations, if you will, and have been in the process of implementing this major reform to Medicaid. And right in the middle of this major reform that was going to help us be more fiscally responsible, not put additional fees on people, not continue to put us down the path that we were going on, in the midst of this, we have to now deal with the Affordable Care Act. And I think that's the real shame of it. And so in the Senate, like the House, we have a committee to look at it. The numbers are moving constantly as we try to predict, but your points are very well taken. And so one of the goals is to make sure we minimize the impacts. And believe me, representing a lot of agrarian areas like I do, there are a lot of businesses with many employees that are without opportunity or option as this bill moves forward.
This is for Representative Boyd.
Identify yourself
Julie McClure.
and the organization you're representing.
I represent me. I do estate sales
Okay.
and appraisals. So.
Okay. Okay.
I actually had a elections bill when I was in, and this was in '92. One aspect of it was to reduce the prior registration time before an election. And that was, the supervisors went crazy. And they were still using paper ballots in '92. Now, hopefully, considering our history, that's been all eliminated. But actually, people moving to Florida are disenfranchised a month before an election because the time, I'm not for same-day registration. I think it puts too much stress on your elections. But have you considered that, looking at the prior registration time it takes in your bill? And could that be something you might think about?
Thank you.
Because if you're moving, a lot of people move here.
Sure. Representative Julie McClure, thank you. She actually represented our district several years before you, I think, Senator. But thank you for the question. We are actually right now in the House side, as you've seen, the Senate has moved an ethics part of their package forward, I think, for trying to get it ready for the floor early. We are and we're doing that in the House as well. It's just they're a little bit ahead of us on that. We might be a little bit ahead on elections, and we'll all come together hopefully as we move forward. On the elections part, that's a good point. What we've done right now, Julie, is we've had testimony from everybody that you can imagine, from the supervisor of elections to those associations, the League of Women Voters, just a variety of testimony on what they think ought to be in our package. So we don't have a bill yet. We don't have anything formed up yet. But your point is one that certainly could be considered as we move forward. I mean, there are a variety of issues. The governor, I think, came out last week with some of those, his plan, and some of those are some of the consistent themes that we've been hearing as well in our House committee meetings. So as we move over the next couple weeks, we'll be back. The three of us will be back, and Representative Roussan in February for 3 weeks. A lot's going to happen then on a lot of these issues because those are 3 busy committee weeks. So I suspect that we'll start to get some framework of the elections bill certainly we'll take your point to the table as we move into it, but specifically that has not been addressed yet.
Good morning. I'm John Horn from the Anna Maria Oyster Bar. I had a great question about insurance, but Nick asked it because it's very frustrating as a business owner to try to provide insurance. You go and you talk to your insurance agent and they have no idea what to tell you. We have penalties if we don't determine our health care issues for our staff. I mean, it's very black and white what's going to happen to us, penalties, the 9.5% of their wages. And, you know, we've done all the math we can. You go to an agent and they don't know because there's no state exchange. So please work on that. I know that's foremost in a lot of you, but it's got to be solved. It needs to be solved quickly. We're supposed to alert our staff by March what our health care plan is, right? This is the end of February. So you're cutting our time close. We have penalties, you do not, right? So please get on that when you get there quickly. Greg, DBPR, Secretary Lawson, keep him, whatever you have to do. That guy is a fireball. He is the greatest secretary I've ever seen in a bureaucracy. I mean, he's almost as good as Ed Hunziker here in Manatee County. Almost. But I tell you, he came to one of the restaurant and lodging meetings and he said, my name is Ken Lawson. Here's my cell phone. Everybody put my cell phone number in your hall. You have a problem with DBPR, you have a problem with an inspector, call me. I'll solve your problem. He said, you're our customer. And that's what we have here, but please keep Ken. Thank you.
So John, your question is to Representative Stubbe is, are you going to keep Mr. Lawson?
No, he's not. Well, just whatever you have to do.
Okay.
I'll make a quick comment on that. I actually knew Ken. He and I are both Army JAGs. He was an Army JAG officer. Around the same time I was an Army JAG officer, and he's from Hillsborough County. So I actually met him when I first campaigned, 4 years ago now. He is a great guy and is understanding of businesses and your needs and the needs to repeal a lot of the regulatory hoops that you have to go through and make it easy for people to do business in the state of Florida. Just to kind of piggyback on that, one of the things that we just got a presentation on that we're moving forward, that we passed a bill last year to create an e-portal for the state of Florida. So for all businesses in the state of Florida now, there will be one website that you have to go to, and Division of Business and Professional Regulations through Ken, and then there's several agencies. DOR has a piece of it because of the revenue piece. There's going to be one website in the state of Florida that you have to go through for all of your business needs. So from a tax perspective, if you want to set up a company and do your articles of incorporation, all of that is going to be on one website. And I think the launch date it was supposed to be January, but they gave us a presentation because they were required by law to give us a presentation on where they were at. I think it's going to start in June. So he has done wonderful things, and there's other great things that are come out specifically for businesses that I think the Chamber will be very interested in that will help ease the things that you typically have to do from a regulatory standpoint to make it easy for people to do business in the state of Florida. So thank you for your comments.
And John, he's a big proponent of food trucks. Are you going to do one? He's licensed like, yeah, he's done about 40 of them in the last month, I think.
Yes.
Good morning. My name is Dave Potter. I work at the Family Partnership Center, and Bill, you wanted a hardball, so let's try assault weapons. I read a lot about what's going on with Vice President and the committees, but I'd like to know what's going on in Florida regarding assault weapons.
I think he asked you. So I don't know.
Well, first of all, I'm not aware of a bill that has been brought forward with regard to assault weapons. We have been looking at security issues. In fact, my committee spent the last 2 committees having hearings with everyone from university presidents to college presidents to school personnel to law enforcement to see what and where we need to address the issues. And the results that are coming back to us are really not about weapons, but more about things that we can do from a technology standpoint, from a prevention standpoint, mental health, that type of issue, and then partnerships with the districts. And so if I had to predict the Senate's response to what has occurred recently and horribly, I'll add, and too often, I'll also add, you'll probably see additional dollars going to tighten up facilities. See additional dollars going to better communication. That was one of the themes that higher education brought back to us. We've seen some proposals about boots on the ground, but we are not going to have a knee-jerk reaction to what might be a political placebo, but instead we're going to really address the issue of security.
Dave, from the House side, I probably would echo what the senator said. I know you heard Representative Stubbe say he's working on some legislation that would deal with the boots on the ground issue, but specifically no bill that I'm aware of yet has been filed in the House to deal with any of. Much of this is, unfortunately, some of it is a federal issue, and what they do will dictate perhaps some of what we're able to do or what we can do. But I think to follow what Bill said, there'll be a keen interest in trying to get at who are the people that are causing these problems and how can we help them as well, which we all know that a person that's not stable with a gun is a bad scenario. So I think there'll be a lot of effort along those lines as we move through the session.
Okay, next, and we've probably got time for these last two questions here. Go ahead.
Hi, Diana Shoemaker, and I'm the Executive Director of Manatee County Habitat for Humanity. As you know, funding for Habitat is mostly done on a local level. We do as much as we can locally to raise funds to help families in our community. However, we do benefit from a state program called the State Housing Initiative Program, and we have not had the funding for that program in the last year or so. And I was asked, my question is, can you speak to that issue of State Housing Initiative Program and where that monies may become available, and if they do, when they might become available for a benefit of Habitat?
Anyone specifically, or just best on?
I'm sorry.
We'll tag team.
Yeah, I think any of those initiatives, all of those initiatives are in play and for review this session. That's what we do. We're going to look at the governor's budget next week, and you can look to see how he has addressed it. But keep in mind, and this is something a lot of people forget, the governor doesn't appropriate money. The governor can only make a recommendation, and sometimes the recommendation doesn't even add up. Not with this governor, maybe our prior governor. But we will look at all these initiatives, and our fiscal year starts in July.
Yeah, Diana, of course, we all appreciate what you do, and it's a great service to not just the community, but our country and across the states. I agree with Bill. We'll, finally we've got a little bit of money ahead versus, a lot of money in the hole that we've, got to figure out how to deal with. So I think all those things are on the table. I haven't specifically heard anything about SHIP, as they call it, the program that you mentioned, but I think that's something that definitely we can take a look at as we move through the process. And our friend Representative Stubbe is on appropriations in the House, which is a great place for us to have representation for issues like that. So we'll keep a good eye on it. And as we move through the process, if things happen that you see maybe before us sometimes, please reach out to us and let us know as well, because lots of times we get in our kind of committees and our silos, if you will, and we may not know something else is happening until it's brought to our attention or until it gets to the floor. So if we can help before that, it always makes a lot of sense. So keep us up to speed as well if you hear things that maybe we haven't heard yet. Thanks.
And our final question of the morning.
Good morning. I'm Lisa with the Manatee Chamber, and I have a question. What is the outlook for citizens, and should property owners start looking now for alternatives, now that it's not hurricane season?
Who should address that one?
I had a feeling you'd get up.
Well, only by default. And I am not on the insurance committee this year, so I'm kind of keeping in the loop because I'm just interested in what's good for Florida and what's good for our local economy. As you know, there's a lot of issues swirling around citizens right now. One of the things that's being looked at is an exchange, if you will, or a clearinghouse, I think they're calling it, where when somebody has the need for coverage, it goes through this mechanism, which is kind of a technology mechanism. And if there's a private carrier out there that will take your policy, it goes there instead of Citizens. All too often, policies have just gone to Citizens without maybe the chance of a private market solution because it's easier sometimes for the agent or broker to do that. So I think that's going to happen this year. I don't think there'll be, personally, I don't see any great sweeping rate changes. There is a glide path that some of our friends before us put in place, which was a good idea. Our big exposure is wind, as you know, and in fact, Citizens started out as a windstorm pool that kind of morphed into a full-blown company. So what that would mean is, and they're looking at policies in Citizens to take out. So they would provide the wind coverage in a private market scenario at a competitive rate, and there's some mechanisms that I've just learned a little bit, not all of it, but briefly learned about it, that allows for the rate to be competitive what they would be paying in Citizens. But then if that happens, it may let some of the big carriers, or may at least interest some of the big carriers like the State Farms and the Hartfords and the Travelers and the like, to come back in and write the other coverages, fire and theft and those things that aren't nearly as likely to happen in our community anyway as a big windstorm. So that has gained some attention this past week, actually, and I think as they're looking at taking out, I want to say $90 billion of coverage or something from Citizens, which is a start. We've got $500 billion of exposure in Citizens, so that's a start. So I think you'll see some of that being looked at pretty strongly this session.
It's a lively session today. We actually went over a minute, so
my fault.
That's all right. Anyway, it's going to be an exciting session, and again, we look forward to it. In closing, thank you again, Bright House Networks, for being our sponsor this morning. Thanks to our legislative delegation for attending. Thanks to METV for taping, and thank you, Bradenton Country Club, for hosting this very nice breakfast. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.